Hello, and welcome to the DFS Coach Talk podcast. I am your host, Mike Apotria, joined by the one and only Shane, the masterful Caldwell. I'm gonna have to start coming up with new nicknames every single show, man, because when I see the name on the schedule, I get excited. I know I'm getting a wealth of football knowledge from you, and I'm happy to be joined by you, man. So it's Mother's Day. It's May 10th on this beautiful Sunday. But how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. Yeah, excited. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And we're excited as we keep our football preview, our team DFS previews. We're in the NFC North, which is a division I know quite a bit about, and as you do as well. And we're with the Minnesota Vikings today. So that's a very exciting team to preview for DFS. So, yeah, we're ready to get into it.
Oh, yeah, we're going to jump right into it. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. I know that we ran pretty long on yesterday's show, so we're going to try to give you guys the condensed version more often than not. It's me and Santino will take all the fault on that one. I don't shut up. He doesn't shut up. And you put us together sometimes, and that happens, man. So, take our apologies sincerely, but we're gonna jump right into this, man. So I'm gonna pass it off to you. I know you have a lot to get to. We're gonna talk about a little bit of some of the offseason changes, some of the things, how they. We're gonna get to a lot of our draft talk at the end, but how they've kind of replaced some of these offseason players that they lost, some coaching changes. But let's jump right into it, man.
Yeah, no need to apologize. You and Santino are doing an excellent job. But yeah, we're going to keep it moving here. We're going to get the people the information and keep it entertaining as well. So Minnesota Vikings 2019 had a great season. They really dominated in the run game. They were 10-6 overall, second in the NFC North, only to the Packers. And they won the wild card. They went into the playoffs and won the wild card at the Saints, and they were underdog there. So that was a huge win for them. And then they end up getting beat pretty bad by the 49ers by the time they traveled out there to in the divisional round, in a rested 49ers team that was pretty dominant. Obviously, a Super Bowl team was there waiting for them, and they lost pretty bad in that game. But it was still a really successful season to go 10-6 and win a playoff game. They had 8 Pro Bowlers last year, so obviously a ton of talent on that team. One of the things we'll talk about is how the team changed a lot. We'll talk about that in a minute, and that's how it is in the NFL. Like we say, it's a year-by-year league, so you can't necessarily take all the data from 2019 and translate it. You have to look at what the makeup of the team is, because it changes a lot in the NFL, right? So let's just go over the offensive stats real quick here. 2019 offensive stats: total yards, 5,656 yards. It's going to put them for 16th. In the league. So they're kind of in the middle of the road there. They were ranked 23rd in passing at 3,523 team yards. So they were kind of down in the lower tier there because they didn't have a lot of volume. But this is where they excelled. They were 6th in rushing at 2,133 yards. So they were dominant in the running game. That's what they wanted to do. They combined that with the dominant defense. One of the other things that allowed them to win so many games and be so dominant was the turnover ratio differential. The turnover differential, they were 4th in the league at plus 11. The defense, again, was dominant, had 17 interceptions, 14 fumble recoveries. So this was a playmaking defense that was just nasty all around. They could rush the passer. They were covering. They were just making a lot of plays. So they're a tough team to play against. And then they just wore you down with that running game that we'll talk about. Defense 2019 were 14th overall, so they were kind of in the middle of the pack for in terms of giving up yards, and they were in the middle of the pack for passing and rushing, like 15th and 13th. So they're kind of middle of the pack there. Where they really excelled, though, because of their playmaking and they excelled in the red zone defense. They were 5th in points allowed at only 303 points allowed, 18.9 per game. So the Vikings defense stood up where it really mattered in the red zone. So that's where they were dominant there. So that's kind of the overall view of this team, but it's going to change now. Now, you know a lot about the Vikings here, Mike. What do you think about these offseason moves, and how are they actually going to affect the team? And can you talk a little bit about some of the departures and additions they've made, and also some of the coaching staff?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see definitely a big change. Defensively, they lost pretty much their entire secondary. 3 corners left the building. They kind of, attack that in the draft, and they got some notable names that are going to, help. But it doesn't help with the names that they have actually lost. But some of their bigger names, Xavier Rhodes has been a staple there for them. One of their shutdown, in-your-face corners, really notably known to jam people up right at the line of scrimmage. But we were talking a little bit before on air. He kind of was seeing some of his down days, I guess, going forward. Still has a lot left in the tank that'll be able to help another team, but not this one. They also lost Mackenzie Alexander and Trey Waynes, the other two corners that have been there and been staples for them for a little while. But that's not it. The D tackle, defensive end, definitely took a hit, and their nose tackle is gone. Everson Griffin's gone. Linville Joseph gone. The big offensive coordinator that they've been going with, Kevin Stefanski, taking the job over there in Cleveland, and then Gary Kubiak now seeing a new role change for them and kind of taking on a little bit of a multi-positional coaching job now. But he's going to have his fingers entwined in that as the offensive coordinator going forward. Big notable change, Stephon Diggs getting traded over to Buffalo for a first, and I believe it was a third, or the first and a fourth. But, I mean, those rumblings were happening for a while. He was a little unhappy with the circumstances of how the Vikings were going with their offense, being more of a run-heavy team. He just felt like he wasn't getting enough shares in the offense and started trying to be a squeaky wheel in the middle of the season. So, in essence, they did a quick flip-flop for Justin Jefferson, who will probably spend some time talking. And then a few changes on the offensive line. Josh Klein has a new home now as well. So, big overhaul. A few more we're going to talk about. 14 draft picks in this year's draft, so an insane amount of draft picks that they've had. They were littered in the middle of the rounds, but a lot that we're going to get to. So you hit the nail on the head early on when you're talking about last year's numbers and last year's stats, and they're frankly just not going to do us, a whole lot of relevancy when we're talking about how we expect this 2020 future to be for DFS. So we're going to have to put our tinfoil and our thinking caps on and kind of get down to the bottom of this. And, I'll kick it right over to you. Let's jump right into it. Quarterback Kirk Cousins. You touched on it. He was super efficient last season. One of the things that, is really, I guess, underrated about him. When he gets, he's almost like a shell shock pitcher. When it's bad, it's bad. We see some bad throws, some errant throws, but that's okay when you have a quarterback that's willing to take those challenges, throw that deep ball. It's going to happen. They're going to make mistakes, but he really limited his last season. Only 6 interceptions, 26 touchdowns. But I'm gonna let you talk about Kirk.
Yeah, so Kirk Cousins, guy I know quite a bit about. He's actually went to high school about 30 minutes from where I'm at over here in Holland, Michigan, on the Lake Shore. Obviously a Michigan State guy, so I followed him for years. Really high character, obviously very intelligent, very accurate quarterback. So he's a great quarterback, and he gets paid well for it, right? So this guy, I mean, he's got to be like in the Hall of Fame just for being able to negotiate a contract. I mean, this guy, he gets everything guaranteed. And what's he make? Like over 30 million guaranteed per year. So, and that kind of led to some of these cap issues that the Vikings are having, and paying him a lot of money. And had to get rid of some of these guys. So Kirk Cousins last year, he had a great season. It wasn't a high volume passing attack, but he was super efficient when he passed, and he came up big when he needed to. He didn't play as well in the playoffs, though. So coming down the stretch there, he didn't play as well. Statistics, fantasy stats were not good. They kind of got exposed being a little more one-dimensional and just relying on the run game there. To his defense, he did lose his go-to guy, Adam Thielen, for I think it was like 6 games last year as well. But yeah, let's go over Kirk Cousins' stats real quick. So he was little over 3,600 passing yards, 8.1 yards per attempt, which was okay. Where he really excelled, 26 passing touchdowns and only 6 interceptions. He did have 1 rushing touchdown as well. So he was just overall efficient. He was kind of middle of the road. Played 15 games. He wasn't dominant by any means, but he had some big games. Kirk Cousins' big games was for DraftKings was right around 37 points, 35 points, 32, 31, 30. So he had quite a few games over 30. The same thing on FanDuel, quite a bit in the high 20s to mid 30s. He did have some dud games that he mixed in there, though, because of the philosophy with just trying to run and the defense being so dominant. So being that with all these changes and so much of a youth movement on defense, we're not expecting the defense to be as dominant, which is going to be a better game environment for Kirk Cousins. That means we should have an upgrade for Kirk Cousins. If this offensive line can actually protect him, because he doesn't necessarily do well under pressure, if they can protect him and he gets some of these new receivers going, he is going to actually have more passing volume probably because of the way the game flow is going to be. So I expect maybe a few more shootouts and a little bit more passing volume. And so I think that if he just maintains a similar efficiency with more volume, he's going to be an upgrade for the 2020 season for DFS, and he's going to be a good target being that he's not very, very expensive.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree anymore. I think we spoke a little bit about it before we jumped on, and just the lack of their secondary, knowing that they're going to be going with rookies, they're going to be going with a little bit of experience all over the field. I mean, a lot of this offensive line is going to be second and third year guys, guys that were pretty inexperienced, that the team feels like they're ready now, and it's going to struggle. It's going to be a struggle all around for the team. So they're definitely going to, I think, have more offensive opportunities in general. They were taking the philosophy of, let's grind the clock out. Let's be the first team to get on the board. Then we're going to make it, a hell for them to get the ball back, and we're going to hold on to it. We're going to grind it out. And when they do get the ball back, we're going to jam their guys up early on the line. We have enough pressure to kind of make them a little bit of uncomfortable. And that was their philosophy. Run the ball, good defense. Well, now they have a young defense. They still could run the ball. Don't get me wrong, but it's going to be harder for them to grind the clock out if they're chasing points. If we've seen Kirk Cousins, and this is what I love about him. He's fully capable of throwing the deep ball. He's fully capable of leading a comeback. We've seen him do that year in and year out. He's been very, very good at leading comebacks, but he's not afraid to take chances. And, it bites him sometimes, but it's also very good for fantasy a lot of the times, whether you're one of his receivers or if you're playing him yourself. So you touched on a lot of those big games, and those were probably games that needed to come in opportunities where they had to throw a little bit more. So I'm with you. I'm giving him a little bit of an upgrade going into the season. I kind of had him as a top 10 fantasy quarterback regardless. But he's definitely getting a nice little boost. And I think we can feel a little bit more confident that, doesn't really necessarily hurt Dalvin Cook because he's going to be the guy on receiving a lot of these screen passes. We've seen that last season as well. But it definitely benefits Kirk as well.
Yeah, definitely. They want to run the ball. I mean, it's Mike Zimmer and Gary Kubiak, his offensive coordinator. They want to run the ball, but they're going to be forced to get out of their game plans and not be able to run the ball as much. That's what I see coming here, which is probably good for fantasy. And the nice thing about, as we transition into running backs, the nice thing about Dalvin Cook, who's coming off a career year and an excellent fantasy season, is that he is a true 3-down back. So if they are in that game, that hurry up, faster paced offense or need to pass more, he's still involved, which is great. And they're still going to want to run the ball as much as possible. So Dalvin Cook is going to be another guy that's going to be just as good, if not better than last year. And he's coming off a huge fantasy year. So what's your opinion on Dalvin Cook?
I mean, I absolutely love him. He was one of the guys I had circled going into last season, where if you were just looking at guys on the outside of that top 5 that you could see, potentially being one of those number 1 overall fantasy backs for DFS for season long, whatever it may be, it could have been him. And he did not disappoint. I mean, the only thing with Dalvin Cook has been health. A Florida guy, when he first came on his rookie season, he blew up. He was coming out of the gates firing, and then the injury happened. And, the following year, more just nagging, riddling injuries. I think he played 10 games following that. So we almost got to see, and it wasn't even a first full season. It was still only, I believe, 14 games. So, but we got to see what a full season could look like, and he's unbelievable. He's a true 3-down back. He's not going to be a Christian McCaffrey where he's necessarily getting 80 catches or 80 receptions, but I think you're looking at 40 to 50 pretty much surely because he's not necessarily coming off the field. One thing I do think is, and knowing that he only played 14 games in that last one, and that the injuries have been a problem from him in the past, is that we might see Madison get pretty involved. I mean, 100 rushes last season is nothing shy for a rookie. So I think that's something that we might end up seeing a little bit more going forward. Not saying he's going to, necessarily jump in there and take a volume workload, but 120 to 140 might be on the horizon. They want this guy for playoffs, bottom line. And, we saw him going into playoffs. He was a little hobbled. He wasn't 100%. And when this is where the direction that they want to go to, if they want to lead with the run like they have been, they need this guy at 100% healthy. So, I still have him up there as one of my top backs going into the season, especially knowing that he's going to be that 3-down guy. That's what we're looking for on DK, guys that are going to be catching passes as well. So I just want to temper the expectations where if they do have a big lead, we might be a little bit more Madison time in fourth quarter if they don't need to use Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I agree with you on Madison. I'll talk about him in a sec. I just want to highlight a couple of Dalvin Cook's stats here. Yeah, only 14 games, but 250 rushing yards. So the volume was still there. We're expecting maybe not quite as much run volume this year, so we have to account for that. And Alexander Madison is a great backup, a change of pace. to give him a breather and to help maintain his health and longevity, which is a huge thing with Dalvin Cook. But he still had Dalvin Cook 1,135 yards, 4.5 yards per rush, which was excellent. 13 touchdowns, so he was huge in the red zone. And he got 63 targets in the passing game, so 53 receptions. So I think even if he loses a few carries in the running game, he's going to probably pick up more in the receiving game. So I could see him, 60, 65 receptions in this game. 500 this upcoming year, 519 receiving yards at 9.8 average, is pretty solid. So really, like in PPR formats, you've really seen him excel because he did well in rushing touchdowns and catching the ball. He didn't actually get any receiving touchdowns, but his top DraftKings games, he was on fire early in the year, but he had games of like 31 points, 30, 28, a couple games of 28, 27. He didn't have that many duds. He had a couple duds, but for the most part, he was really consistent. If you caught him on those high upside games where he would have a great rushing game and still catch a lot of passes, PPR, yeah, I mean the guy was one of the top backs to get. But towards the later half of the year, he got injured and he started becoming a little more hit or miss there. He wasn't as easy just to target, to try to take down some DFS tournaments or cash games. So in Madison, they got him as a late round draft pick. He's explosive, also a big physical guy, and he actually averaged 4.6 yards per carry. So he had 100 carries, 462 yards, and only one touchdown. So not as much use in the red zone. Dalvin Cook was in there. Madison caught 10 balls for 82 yards, so not a huge contribution, but a little bit there. I think that we will see Madison's snap share increase, his snap percentage increase, and to spell Dalvin Cook, but Dalvin Cook's still going to be an elite level running back, and we're expecting him to probably catch a few more passes this year with the game script as well. So I think it's a good situation still.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. And for as far as Madison, I think we could just probably segue right into there. I mean, we pretty much hit on everything as far as Dalvin Cook. He's one of the only handful of three down back workhorses in the league that's in a run first offense. So he's going to be pricey in the right matchups. We're not going to mind spending up on him. That's not going to be the issue. But as far as Madison goes, he's going to be a guy. If anything does happen to Cook, if anything, maybe he's getting a little dinged up, and you need to give him a little bit of a break, rest him a game or two. Knock on wood. We never want to say anything about seriously long-term injuries. But as far as a short-term injury, I'm looking for a guy like Madison. He's the perfect guy that you want to slot in there when he's dirt cheap. He's getting that starting role, let's say, for that game or two. Perfect guy that you want to target. This he's good. He's going to be very good to come. There's a reason why they drafted him, and I know that when it comes to major guys going down, he's one of the first guys I have circled as that could step up and give elite level production.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely one of the premier backups in terms of the premier handcuffs. Of course, in the DFS world, we don't really worry about handcuffs as much, but what we do worry about is injury replacements that where their salary hasn't been adjusted yet. So I could see Alexander Madison, if Cook goes down, he's going to be definitely a chalk type play, a guy that has a high upside, explosive, and a great offense that could step into that 3-down role. They do throw in Mike Boone and Amir Abdullah a little bit there as well if Cook goes down. The only worry with Madison,
Boone's a free agent, I think, after this year too as well.
Yeah, that's true. The only thing with Madison that you kind of worry about is if you are trying to play him as a value play and he's super high owned, if it's a type of game where they're not running the ball as much and they're giving up a lot on defense, right? And I don't know if he's as good in the receiving game as for the game script. So that could be a situation where, again, it's bad chalk where you may have to pivot off him. So, yeah, depending on the matchup, he's definitely going to be a guy to target if Cook goes down there. So,
and, I'll jump in real quick, and I'm saying it for a reason where unless it's like they're going against the Bucs, it's an elite level run defense. I'm willing to eat the chalk on a guy like him. That's everybody has to worry that when a guy is that chalky, do I benefit more from fading him or playing him? Obviously, the type of tournament you're in and the kind of contest that you're in is going to be a major factor. But he's the type of guy that I'm fully willing to eat the chalk on because I just love him as a talent. I think he's excellent, and just the fact that they're not going to go away from their philosophy. They got him for a reason. They gave him a good amount of touches. 100 touches for a backup running back to a complete workhorse during your rookie season shows that you're committed. You're fully committed in this guy as your backup, and they're not going to go away from their philosophy. I don't think if Dalvin Cook goes down for a game or two, this team's just going to all of a sudden start airing the ball out. unless they have to. So that's kind of what that was my necessary point. I'm willing to eat the chalk when the time's right for him.
Yeah, I agree with you overall there. I think interesting, whenever Alexander Madison would get the ball, you would think it was Dalvin Cook until you saw the back of the jersey number because the guy was so explosive. He had good vision and power, just like Cook does. Yeah. So you really couldn't tell the difference between the guys besides the volume. And it was interesting that when Dalvin Cook went down, I think Madison was injured as well. So I don't believe that Madison had a full game to himself. Correct me if I'm wrong.
He started the game. So yeah. he didn't finish it though. That's
exactly. So we haven't seen that scenario yet where he actually got to play through the whole game. So yeah, we haven't seen Alexander Madison full out value chalk week yet, but it could happen because Dalvin Cook does have that reputation. But yeah, I don't think he's going to have standalone value just because of limited upside. But yeah, he will pop off though on some games, even with Cook in there, but it's just too hard to predict. So it's not something we would target. But yeah, definitely a player that was super impressive, and they spent like a really late round draft pick on him. I don't know if it was a 5th or 7th. It was something around there. So they got a steal on him.
5th. I think it was 5th, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it was really late. Familiar. Yeah, so they got a steal.
All right. I mean, we could touch on Boone quickly, I guess, if we want. Abdullah. He's been flashes in the pan, nothing spectacular. Not some guy that, again, he's at best case scenario going to be replacement level type guy, but we're going to be looking towards Madison. Boone's in the final year of a contract this season, so maybe they do him a favor midway through, trade him to a team in need of a running back, let him kind of earn himself some more money. We've seen several teams do that sometimes with the guys that they like that haven't been, I guess, Stephon Diggs of the locker rooms for them. So and we'll just, I guess, slide right over to receiver. I mean, we have a lot to talk about with receiver. We'll start right off. Adam Thielen only played 10 games last season, was dealing with hamstring injuries. And then he had that weird Achilles injury as well that happened during practice. He got rolled up on cleat, gave him a really, really bad scrape. It was like a cut, actually. And the immediate fear was that he tore his Achilles tendon. Just ended up being a little bit of a nagging injury that caused some problems. It was the hamstring that really, really bothered him. And we've seen that in football time and time again, especially if it's a running back or a receiver, somebody that's explosive off the line. It's tough. A hamstring can nag all season long, and if you don't give it the appropriate amount of time, and that's kind of what happened in Thielen's case. He came back a little early. He re-aggravated it. It does more harm than good, and it seemed like he never really got right back on that page that he was used to. He never really played at that 100% level. But, big elephant in the room with Diggs gone, this is kind of his guy. This is Ben Cousins' guy. They've been friends in the locker room. They work out on the sideline. They work out together off the field as well. So a lot of people are expecting him to jump up and just kind of grab this number one role that he's, been splitting, I guess, with Diggs over the past couple of years and run with it. I'll bring up his numbers real quick. 48 targets in 10 games last season, 30 receptions, 418 yards, 6 touchdowns, had a catch percentage of about 62.5, averaged 13.9 yards per reception. So those are the numbers. I'm going to kick it over to you. Are you expecting, Justin Jefferson's pretty much going to slot right into that same role Diggs had, but what kind of year are you anticipating for Thielen, especially coupled with the fact that we just talked about their secondary and their defense in general? Is he, I guess I should start this. Where do you think he's priced, first game of the year?
I think he's probably going to be high $6,000 to $7,000 range, right around there. And I think he could pay off that value. He popped off last year on DraftKings. In the short amount of time he did play 10 games, he had a 35-point game. He went off 22 and 20. Had a couple games around 20 and then a couple in the high teens. He did have some duds though, so that's what made people kind of nervous about him. But again, the philosophy of the team last year, run the ball first, and even when Thielen was healthy or he was trying to play, sometimes he wasn't healthy. So my point is, if Thielen comes back and he looks good in preseason and camp and he's healthy, in this offense, the continual theme is that this offense is going to have to pass more. They're going to be forced to. Is that Thielen's a guy for sure you fire up in DFS fantasy world in general. He's definitely a guy that's due for a big upswing in production, a lot more targets. And he's another one of those guys, I call them the technicians. They're just excellent route runners. They have good hands. He's got great chemistry. Obviously, Kirk Cousins loves him, and he can hit you deep. He can, get you over the middle. His route tree is amazing. He can line up in the slot. He can line up outside. So mostly a slot type guy. And he's just really great, especially in those PPR formats, because he's not necessarily always a big red zone guy. Yeah, so definitely upgrade on Thielen as well. Really high on him with Diggs gone as well. And it's going to take a little while. I think the rookie's going to be great, but I think it'll take him a little while for Justin Jefferson to get acclimated. So that means Thielen is going to be a target monster.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And that's one thing I was going to say is early on in the season, I'm going to be lighting up Thielen. I'm going to be loading up on Thielen in DFS just because there's not OTAs. The chemistry is going to take a little bit. Listen, Justin Jefferson is game ready. He's NFL ready. He's shown that last year. He played primarily out of the slot in LSU, but this kid can play all over the field without a doubt. They're going to get this guy involved. He's quickly. But I think he's going to come on to the season really pop off a little bit later on. I think, maybe weeks like 5 or 6 and on, we're going to see him, we've seen several star rookie receivers really get acclimated, get the first, few weeks in there and then blow up towards the end of the season. I'm not talking about necessarily like Terry McLaurin, who almost did a little bit of the opposite, but we've seen other guys like OBJ. His was a little bit more injury related. Once he got to 100%, he was just lighting it up. So I'm fully expecting that for Jefferson. But early on, I'm going to be all over Thielen. This is his guy. This is where the rapport has been built for over the years. It's his go-to target. And Thielen's, while he plays in the slot, you touched on his route tree. He's also a big dude. He's like 6'2", 200, 210. He might have to get a little bit more involved in the red zone. I think that's part of the reason why they were allured to Jefferson. I think that I'm expecting Thielen to be used in on the outside as well. He's going to be used all over the place. This is his guy. So early on, if that price tag, like you said, if that's what we're thinking, around that 6-7K range, no problem paying up for it in the right matchups.
So let me give you. I'm taking a look at the Vikings schedule. Let me give you in the first quarter of the season, the first 4 weeks. That's kind of the way I look at the NFL's season. Week 4, the Vikings are at Houston at the Texans. That is probably the first matchup that I would say if Thielen's healthy, you're all in on that because they have a weak secondary and the other side of the ball can produce with Deshaun Watson, even with DeAndre Hopkins gone. So I feel like that has shootout potential. So that's just one that I would target right away with Adam Thielen because they are playing the Packers the first week at home, which he's had success against the Packers, but that Packers defense is much improved, and the teams know each other so well. So I'm targeting those non-divisional games in domes that could turn into a shootout and that has a weak secondary that Thielen could absolutely shred and that Cousins may actually be forced to pass to if if the Texans get some points on them. So that's one that comes to mind just by looking at the schedule.
And I'm glad you looked at the schedule because now it's almost as we have to, and this is the type of Thielen player Thielen is. He can, I agree with you with everything as far as Green Bay. They're going to try to get him involved early. He's that one. He can break off that one catch for 72 yards at a touchdown so easily. And we're going to see the price tag if he plays well in those first 3 weeks rise. And that's my worry. I almost want a few duds in that first couple weeks. That way, once we do get to week 4, we're getting a little bit of a normal to depressed salary because we've got to imagine people walking into Houston, especially in shootout potential, are going to see a little bit of inflation on their price tag. And you hit it. They're going to shoot out. It's David Johnson in there as well now. It's like that offense is going to click. So I'm fully anticipating some sort of shootout in that game, and I'll be all over Thielen as well. And we'll slide. I mean, unless you have anything else you really want to hit on Thielen, I think it's pretty much set in stone what type of receiver he's been over the past few years. We'll just we'll jump right into Justin Jefferson.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Jefferson. So Jefferson had one of the best years of college guy in a long time at LSU last year. Obviously, this LSU offense was just on fire with Joe Burrow and all the weapons they had. Dominant offensive line. It was like a video game offense on easy mode. I mean, that was just crazy. So this guy puts up 111 catches last year, 1,540 yards, averages about 14 yards a catch, and he gets 18 touchdowns. I mean, and that's in the college season, which is, shorter, 12, 13 games. So it's just ridiculous stats. And if you look at his athleticism, the guy's 6'1", over 200 pounds, 4'4", 40, 37-inch vertical. His relative athletic score, which is called the RAS score, which measures those positions against other similar wide receiver classes, he was almost a perfect score. He was 9.69 out of 10, which is elite level explosion, athleticism, agility, quickness, all that stuff combined with size. So if you look at all those things combined, he's set up to do big things. I think that he's the type of guy that it might take him a little while to get going, but probably a guy around mid-season in the right matchup that you would want to target, even if he hasn't done well up to that point. But yeah, this guy's super talented, and I'm of the opinion that he probably should have been drafted earlier, but just the way that the wide receiver class was loaded, because he fell to the 22nd pick. And, it was kind of a controversy.
Like this,
what was it? Philadelphia right before him took the other wide receiver, and they're like, what? Everyone thought Philadelphia was going to take
we could start with
Jefferson.
Oakland with Ruggs, in my opinion, if you want to start there. I think it goes even higher up than that. I don't think this guy, he was questionably could have been, him and CD should have been the first two off the board, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I like Ruggs. I didn't have any issue with that, but I think it was Jalen Reagor went to Philadelphia, if I remember right. I don't have the notes here on the draft, but I believe that's what it was. So, so that's going to be one of those players that are two players that are always going to be compared as Justin Jefferson and Reagor. And Philadelphia is kind of known for missing on these receivers, so we'll see there. So that's definitely big things ahead for Justin Jefferson, but he's a guy where you might want to exercise caution earlier in the year. What's your opinion? Are you ready to go after this guy right away and target him if he's pretty reasonably priced, or are you thinking a wait and see approach?
So, well, that's my thinking is I'm with you in the camp where I think it's going to take him a couple games just to get acclimated, especially, to build a little bit of rapport with Kirk Cousins. He's a guy that's very keen on actually trusting his receivers. So I think that I'm probably going to avoid him for the first few games. I'm also not expecting that he's going to come in. They're all that cheap. I mean, he's a big name. There's a lot of hype that's surrounding that name. He's stepping right into a spot where he's going to start, and a lot of people are expecting him to produce immediately. So I think I'm probably going to shy away from him the first few games. I'm expecting, not bad games by any way, shape, or form. I mean, you touched on it. This dude's an absolute monster. 111 receptions, 109 of those coming out of the slot. 18 touchdowns. I believe 17 of those touchdowns were out of the slot. So, and this is a guy that, they asked him all throughout high school. He was an outside receiver. That's how athletic this dude is that he can adapt. He can play anywhere on the field. And yes, he was primarily a slot player in that amazing season that he had. He's going to line up all over the place. Mike Zimmer's crazy excited about this kid. I believe he was quoted saying that the reason we got this dude and we were like licking our chops when we saw him that he was still on the board is because his ability to go up there and get a ball, his ability to adjust in the air. I think he's going to be a primary focus for them in the red zone. Obviously, Kyle Rudolph is still there and has always been one of their red zone go-to targets because they really haven't had one with Diggs and Thielen. They both are fully capable of getting their own, but they're not those jump up and go get the ball type players. Jefferson is one of those guys. He's going to come down with it in a jump ball, and I'm fully expecting to have a lot of use in that kind of red zone package. So long story short, yes, crazy excited about him. I think he's going to live up to the hype. You just heard me say it, one of my top two receivers coming into the draft. And I think he's going to make those teams punish. He even said it himself. He's going to hold that grudge. He's got that chip on his shoulder, and his goal is to be better than every single receiver that was taken before him and make those other teams pay. So, very excited about him. I think he's going to thrive on this team. I think it's a perfect fit for him. It's just the one thing that I kind of think about is he's used to playing in the warm. That's one. He's going to have to get used to Minnesota. That's one thing. He's going to have some cold hands. So, yeah. That's true. Yep. Very good point.
If he goes to Green Bay, you might be a little nervous about him, right? Or Chicago.
the whole division is absolutely chilling. I completely forgot that they do play in a dome. So maybe not at home, he's not going to have to worry about it. But it's definitely going to be a little bit colder than the Bayou that he's used to.
Yeah. And one other thing I will mention with these wide receivers, we got a couple other guys we'll go over. But in the strategy show in late April, Andrew Hansen and I went over different types of players to target on DraftKings versus FanDuel. And this is a perfect example. If Justin Jefferson is the type of guy that we think he's going to be a red zone target, kind of a big play threat, he's the type of guy we probably target on FanDuel a little bit more. Unless for some reason he gets a couple games where he has, double-digit targets and starts going off. But for the most part, he's the type of guy that's going to not get as much volume as Thielen, but he's going to hit big plays and be a red zone target. with his size. So he's more of a FanDuel target is what I'm projecting, where Adam Thielen is definitely like a PPR type guy. Again, just going to be getting a ton of volume and just picks teams apart and exploits matchups there. So, and he doesn't catch as many touchdowns. So he's more of a DraftKings play for Thielen. So that's just another example of guys that you might target on FanDuel versus DraftKings, an example of that. And we'll see what Jefferson looks like. Now, what do you think about I didn't realize that they signed Tajay Sharp, kind of a veteran, decent receiver that came out of Tennessee. What do you think about him as a prospect in this offense?
I think it's a good landing spot. I mean, we've seen, plenty of those first round receivers kind of flop over there in Tennessee. And, whether it's just the guys that they're picking, maybe it's the scouting department not getting the right guys and they keep thinking they are. Or maybe it's just guys that aren't meshing well over there because they haven't had a real passing attack until, pretty much halfway through the season when Tannehill took over. But I think it's a great fit. I think he's pretty much the front runner for that, that third receiver job right now, more of like an outside type guy. So I think, he'll not really much for DFS other than GPP boomer bust type player. This isn't a pass heavy offense. I mean, you could target him as a low owned GPP dirt cheap type of guy in those scenarios that we talked about where it might be a shootout. Maybe that, you want to just go completely off the page. Adam Thielen's expected ownership's at like 30% in a GPP. And now all of a sudden you say, all right, maybe I'll just leave Thielen on the board. I'll get, a DeAndre Hopkins. I'll get another expensive guy. I'm hoping Tajay Sharp goes 3 for 60 and a touchdown at super low ownership, next to nothing. In that kind of circumstance, and that's you heard all the caveats involved there. That's the type of situation.
Well, that's where he was last year. He popped off and had one big game last year. He went off for 2 touchdowns and had 25 fantasy points out of nowhere. So yeah, it's the type of guy on a certain week or a smaller slate you might target him. I think that being that he's a veteran presence and a pretty physical receiver, that Kirk Cousins may trust him in certain situations. So I think he's a guy to keep an eye on, but it's certainly not someone we would target right away. They also got rid of the big mistake, I'll call him, Treadwell. Laquan Treadwell, who's a guy that they drafted. I don't remember what pick it was, but it's a pretty early pick when they took him.
It was a first round pick. It was a first round pick.
Yeah, it was definitely first round. It was pretty early, and he was a guy that kind of dominated in college, but he was kind of, not very fast, not necessarily a great route runner type receiver. So they finally got rid of him. One guy that I like is a deep sleeper is that Olabisi Johnson. They got him in the 7th round last year, and he kind of showed some stuff that Kirk Cousins can trust him. He showed some athleticism and some big playability and red zone threat last year as well. So he ended up with 3 touchdowns with he had 45 targets, 31 catches, 294 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. What do you think about Johnson?
I think he's a name to watch. I don't as far as immediate impact, he's going to have to work his way up the pecking order a little bit. Obviously injuries happen, things can happen. He could get a little bit more involved a little faster. But I think early on, he's just going to be simply depth, special teams kind of guy. He might have an opportunity on return, but I don't believe he's necessarily a known speedster. He's just an overall physical presence. He's a good. I believe he played at Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know a ton about the guy because I really don't. But that's kind of my take on it. It's just too deep on the pecking order right now as far as receiver. I believe he's going to probably come into the camp 5th, maybe have a chance at competing for the 4 job, but still ways down the totem pole.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that if there's an injury could definitely start in 3 wide receiver sets. They're probably going to have to run more 3 wide receiver sets if the defense isn't as good and they're coming from behind.
Yeah,
and so he is a guy to keep an eye on.
I don't even know if he gets on the field in 3 wide receiver sets, to be honest, because I think Sharp still is over him. They can either run Thielen or Jefferson out of the slot, and then the other one's probably going to play on the outside. And, they still have other guys that if they wanted to run Thielen and Jefferson out in the slot, I don't know if he'd be the immediate guy to end up, or I mean, on the outside, if he'd even get the slot over, guys like Beebe. But
yeah, if one of those guys gets injured,
I get what you're saying.
Or if Justin Jefferson's having a hard time picking up the offense, or even Tajay Sharp, it's no guarantee to be the starter. And keep in mind, I keep bringing it up, shortened off seasons. Olabisi Johnson already knows the playbook. He already knows the offense, so he has an advantage over Tajay Sharp and Justin Jefferson, just in terms of the chemistry with Cousins and everything. So, yeah, he's definitely not a guy I'm targeting, but it's a guy that I'm going to put on the watch list, basically.
Oh, I love that, and that's the number one thing you need to be able to do in DFS, particularly is, everybody knows the easy replacement guys. When somebody goes down, the chalk plays. Everybody knows those. But when you have certain guys that you can follow throughout their career, and I hang my hat on being one of the guys that's been following Christian Wood on the 57 teams he was on in the NBA, where right when this guy gets even a glimmer of opportunity, he's going to crush it. And if that's being able to kind of pinpoint those guys in the right situations, it's a huge one up. So I'm gonna keep him circled, especially if he's a guy that you're pretty high on. And I mean, outside of those main two receivers, I think maybe a little Tajay Sharp. There's not too many guys that we're gonna probably be going for in DFS, and we'll probably just transition really quickly to tight end now. Kyle Rudolph, the staple that's been there for years and years to come. Their team captain, primarily mostly a red zone threat for them. Not really much of a possession type tight end like we've seen. Not one of the guys that is really cemented himself or supplanted anybody. And I guess we always talk about top, maybe 5 tight ends that are just light years ahead of everybody else. I think he falls outside of that top 5, not in an overall actual football perspective, because I think he is in there, but from DFS and a fantasy perspective, I have him outside the top 5 kind of range, more around that 10 to 11. But he played all 16 games. He was an Iron Man last season, had 48 targets, 39 receptions for only 367 yards, so not a ton of yards, but he had 6 touchdowns. So big red zone threat for him, big body. Someone that basically has been their only red zone guy for the past few seasons. And one thing I wanted to talk about is his catch rate, because career high, the guy he was a machine last season, 81.3% catch percentage. And he's been getting better and better, it feels like, every single year with that kind of stat. So what are your thoughts on Kyle Rudolph? We talked about how they might air the ball out a little bit more, but they do have a couple new additions as far as, guys in that offense. But what's your anticipation for him this season for DFS?
Yeah, he's the same. He's the type of guy you're going to get him at like $3,000 to $4,000 range. He'll hover on DK. So if you need a minimum price guy and you're trying to go with those other high price guys, he's touchdown dependent. So that's the thing that makes you nervous a little bit. And he's not getting a ton of volume, only 39 catches. But the fact that he got 6 touchdowns and, he had fantasy games of 19 points, 18, 17, and 15. So if you're talking $3,000 to $4,000 salary, that's a good value. But I think that he's not getting any younger. He had a pretty good season for being a veteran, but I think that Irv Smith with his athleticism is going to continue to get more and more involved, where they both had about the same amount of volume last year, but Rudolph was more of a target in the red zone. But I expect with more passing in general in between the 20s that I think Irv Smith is actually going to probably get more targets in the passing game for this upcoming season, which is why I'm not really high on Rudolph, just because his floor, he has a decent floor, but he's touchdown dependent and he doesn't have any upside at all. So I'm kind of nervous about Rudolph, and Irv Smith's a guy that I would take a look at, probably more likely to.
Yeah, and I'm probably pretty much in the same camp as that. Not a guy that I would go to unless the price is right. He's the last roster spot I'm filling out. I'm looking at my construction. I'm looking, and I don't see any other receivers necessarily, because I'm not generally stacking with a guy like Rudolph. So when it's a one-off and the price is right and I have no other option, that's probably when I'm really looking at Kyle Rudolph. Not a guy that I'm going to be gravitating towards. Like you said, they went out and got Jefferson because they wanted another red zone target. Irv Smith is there. He's not a possession guy. He's not getting a ton of receptions. He's not a great yards after catch guy either. So the hopes of him breaking them off all the time aren't necessarily there. You're really just hoping that he gets 3 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown. Looks like his ceiling at this point.
Yeah, I think Irv Smith, just at this point, being a younger guy, is a little bit more athletic, a little bit quicker than Rudolph, where Rudolph is like the savvy veteran guy who just uses body control and kind of boxes people out, in the red zone. So he's very productive that way, but he just can't run like he used to with Rudolph. So, he's very, kind of a plotter in terms of slow-footed tight end at this point. Kind of reminds you a little bit of Jason Witten. So those guys can still produce, but I would rather not target them if I don't have to.
Yeah,
that's where I'm
I'm with you. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on him. There's really no purpose. I think at that point we would just probably do an injustice by talking about him too much. So
Yeah.
we'll just transition, I guess, right into. I mean, we've been talking at length and almost nausea at this point about their defense, and we've already touched on a lot of those changes that they've made and what our anticipation is for it. I think we're both on the same page. If they're going to be taking a step back, there's probably going to be find themselves on the field a little bit more often than not compared to last season, and it's going to probably affect the running game a little bit more. Obviously, if they're playing from behind, they're not going to be able to go to Dalvin Cook as much on the ground, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to pass to him in the air. So, the negative effect it's going to have on the running game for Dalvin Cook is probably going to be a positive effect for everybody in the passing game, including Dalvin Cook. So, I mean, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to talk about. I know that we have a lot to get to as far as their draft, but any other quick hits you want to talk about their defense real fast?
No, I mean their defense. They have probably the best linebacker group in the NFL with Kendricks and Barr. They did lose Everson Griffin. That concerns me with their pass rush. So losing them and losing Joseph in the middle. They also lost the safety Sinjeo. I thought it was a good safety that they lost. So I'm concerned about their pass rush not being as good and their ability to cover in the secondary. And we'll talk about that because they are going to be relying on some of these rookie cornerbacks based on the depth chart. They don't have as much experience in the secondary now. Yeah, they still have Harrison Smith, but again, he's a guy that's not getting any younger, but he's still a Pro Bowl caliber safety. But I'm concerned about the youth there and the defense not being as dominant in the pass rush. A little bit too dependent on just the linebacker production. And I think they're a team that you can attack in DFS. And I think that's going to help out the production of the offensive players because they're going to have to be at a faster game script. They're not going to be able to just run the ball and run the clock out. So overall, for real world, they may not be as good. We'll see. But they're still good enough to be maybe 10-6 like last year. But for fantasy, they should be better overall. Yeah. So with the exception of trying to use their defense as your defense in fantasy. So I wouldn't probably target their defense in fantasy because I think they're going to give up a lot more points. Where last year they were ranked in the top 5 and giving up points. This year they're gonna drop down there. So, but yeah, let's talk about the draft picks because if we broke down all these draft picks, it would probably take us a good hour or two, right? I mean, they have like 14 picks. But overall, I think this is a team that really does a great job. Their general manager and their coach staff does a great job of scouting and drafting players. So that's why they had so much confidence in building through kind of retooling through these young guys. They had to because of the salary cap too. So what do you think about their draft? I know I was really high on it, but what's your opinion?
I mean, I think they did a great job. Like if I were to rate it, like, at the end of draft night, I think it's definitely up there, B plus, or, possibly even an A with the way that they kind of filled those positions of need that they had. I mean, time will tell. That's the number one thing with everything is that we have to see how these guys pan out. I mean, everybody comes out of draft day with a certain grade. I mean, we're just talking about Tajay Sharp. If we were to grade him, where the Titans took him and his overall ranking, yeah, they did a great job. But has it panned out for him? No. Has he panned out as a great player so far? Not really. He's serviceable. He's good. Don't get me wrong. He's not anything great. I don't think he's necessarily lived up to his hype. So we're going to have to see how it works. I already said my stance on Justin Jefferson. I do think he will live up to that hype. I do think he's everything that we think he is. He's an athletic freak. He can play all over the place. He's going to, slide right into a position of need for them. And I think after a few games, he'll get his footing and he'll end up being a household name for everybody. And they're going to have one of the best receiving corps with him and Adam Thielen just playing alongside of each other. I think is a great comparison and a great fit for each other. So I absolutely love him. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else we could say about Jefferson as far as we pretty much hit our stance on him. He was one of the guys that we had to talk about already as a firm receiving option. And then as far as, the next one, 31st overall pick, Jeff Gladney, cornerback out of TCU, very physical guy, was a guy that they had circled on their draft boards. They were super excited when they saw that they were going to be able to get him. I think, it's not necessarily going to be a great approach. I think they'd want to give him a year. Mike Zimmer's not a guy that loves to play rookie cornerbacks. He's notoriously actually hated it. But he's a guy that's going to get some immediate use, and he's probably going to get targeted early often. But what's your thoughts on Gladney? I know that we're not going to touch on all 14 picks necessarily, but he's definitely one of the guys that's worth mentioning.
I'm not really high on Gladney coming in as a rookie. I think that he's going to get exposed a little bit in the NFL. He is a guy that's a little bit undersized. I don't know. He is physical for being undersized, and he does have elite speed. He was a very productive player at TCU, but I think that the level of competition is going to go up so much for him and the level of physicality with the receivers that I don't think he's going to be as effective at press coverage. And when you're going up against guys in your division like Devontae Adams and your Adam Thielens, and now the other rookie Jefferson we just talked about. Not him, but
Allen Robinson's a physical freak as well.
Yeah,
he's going to have to get a
exactly.
fair share of him.
Yeah, I was going to say he's going to be going up against Justin Jefferson in practice, so that could help him there. But Allen Robinson, and then of course my guys over in Detroit, Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones. So you're going up against veteran receivers who are very physical and dominant at route running and all those type of things. So I don't feel like these guys are going to be able to come in and be able to cover those type of players right away, and that's why I think that they will take a little bit of step back. They still have a really good defense. Don't get me wrong, but I just feel like these rookies are going to take longer than expected, and these are guys that you're going to want to attack in DFS.
Absolutely. Sure. I'm kind of in the same ship. I think he's going to develop and I think he's going to be a very good corner. I'm not going to take that away. I think he's going to struggle mightily at first. He's not a guy that's necessarily ready to be thrown into the fire. He would probably be, Zimmer would probably rather have him be a working project, but you have to work with what you have. And, with the salary cap restrictions that they did have, it's not like they can go out there and sign that, ready to play corner that they would have liked to. So they kind of have to use with what they have. And he's going to see action, I think, right off the rip. He's probably going to start week 1. And that may be a position that we target is whoever he's on right away, especially if you're looking at Devontae Adams and Allen Robinson, 2 physical guys, 2 big guys that have 3 inches, 4 inches on him, and about another 200 pounds almost, or 220 pounds, 20 to 25 pounds on him as well.
Yeah, right away, week 1, you got the Packers coming into Minnesota, into their dome. And yeah, if you don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be kind of pissed off, coming in there with Devontae Adams, then you ain't paying attention, right? So, so that's what I'm saying is let's make a note there. Devontae Adams, week 1, lock him in.
So you're not getting me help. I'm going to keep going to the number 1 guy I have, and I'm going to pepper him. And listen, I'm sure right when they saw they didn't get another receiver, Devontae Adams being the guy he is, texted his buddy Aaron and said, "Don't worry about it. We'll handle this. We'll show them. We'll show them." So I'm with you on that one.
And I know this is the Packers podcast, but I would target a guy like Allen Lazard, who's kind of going to projected probably be a number 2 receiver, because you might have, let's say Minnesota's top corner would be like Mike Hughes, and let's say he shadows Devontae Adams because they trust him more on that. So that leaves Allen Lazard, who started getting some chemistry and momentum going last year. That leaves him one-on-one with these rookie corners like Gladney, and I think he can pick them apart. So again, those are the type of things that I'm looking at, that I'll be looking at once we get into the season.
Absolutely, and we'll transition right over to another guy who looks like he's going to start right off the rip, and that's their 58th overall pick in round 2, Ezra Cleveland, offensive tackle out of Boise State. They had some needs they needed to address. It was just pretty much all around the team. It was on the offensive end. It was on the defensive end. So the offensive line was one thing that they need to fill. And this guy looks like they're saying he's going to compete right for a starting job. In my opinion, they have no choice. They're going to probably start this kid right off the rip. And he's good. From everything I've seen and read about him, I'm not going to sit here. I try not to put my foot in my mouth on things I don't know about. So I'll probably pass the reins over to you if you know a little bit more. But from the things I've read and I've seen on him so far, he looks like he's pretty game ready. He looks like he's played in the division that was good enough in college where he had some competition. Boise's not necessarily playing one of the strongest divisions, but he's been able to get it done, and he's a veteran. He's had some experience. So I'm looking forward to this kid, and he's going to be tasked with being one of the lead guys to kind of pave the way for Dalvin Cook. And what else do you know about him, I guess?
So Cleveland is a guy that he was dominant at Boise State. really good pass protection, could get after it in the passing in the rushing game as well for run blocking. But yeah, he's a really tall 6'6" guy, so a big guy, but he's got really good athleticism. So I think he'd be great starting for them at right tackle where they really need help there. They got Riley Reef still at left tackle. So yeah, Cleveland could be huge for them at right tackle, which is a spot they've struggled with being able to pass protect as we project. Kirk Cousins may have to pass a little bit more. They really need that pass protection on the right tackle there. So I think that's going to help, and he'll still be able to contribute in this awesome, zone rushing attack as well, and the zone blocking schemes that Kubiak will have. So I think that this guy, they drafted him specifically for the scheme based on what Zimmer and Kubiak want to do, and they're going to trust him to protect Cousins. So I think it was a steal towards the end of the second round. I think he's a great draft pick.
Yeah, and immediate impact. I mean, if you're taking a position in need like that in the second round, and let's be real, offensive line was absolutely stacked, just like receiver was this season. So when you look at guys, Jefferson falling to 22, we're scoffing. This guy, if he went into the draft next year or the year prior or previous to this year, he might have been a first round pick. He's got the size. You talked about his athleticism. I mean, he ran a sub 540 as an offensive tackle, which is just fantastic. You can't argue with that. I mean, you're talking about him immediately being an impact at tackle. I mean, he seems like a guy that's going to be multi-position eligible in years to come, where if they did want to line him up at guard and they want to pull the guard and have him running and blocking, the perfect guy that you want to be in front on like a screen pass and things of that nature. So I'm excited to see some more about him, and we'll let that transition right over to another cornerback that they've taken. Round 3, 89th overall, Cameron Dantzler out of Mississippi State. We were talking a little bit about this guy before we got on air. He's not necessarily, almost the opposite type of build as the guy that they took in the first round. He's a little bit more lanky, slower, but a guy that they might have to rely upon pretty soon with how much depth that they lost. I don't know if he'll be an immediate starter. Maybe he'll be able to shed some clarity on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that's like, 6'2", 6'3". He had great games against Auburn and Alabama, against great competition in the SEC. So the guy was a baller at cornerback there. I think at the NFL level, you wonder whether he projects in terms of not having elite level top end speed. And even though he's super tall and long, over 6'2", I think he has a thin frame as well. So you worry about the physicality and you also worry about the speed. But he's still a pretty good athlete. But again, he had some weaknesses that may be exploited. But he did play the bonus. He played a good level competition. And he played a good in the SEC against elite level competition. So I think a guy that can kind of take over that role like Xavier Rhodes used to be, a bigger, taller, more physical wide receiver. But he's going to have to develop still.
Absolutely. Round 4, they took number 117, another guy that looks like he could be slated to, at least compete for a starting job right away. DJ Wonnum, D-end out of South Carolina. And as we know, the Vikings like their 4th-round defensive ends. I think that's where they took Griffith, if I believe, at one point. So, they've had success there in the past, and they're not afraid to, make these guys immediate impact players. So, why don't you tell us a little bit of something about this kid out of South Carolina? I've heard good things about him. I generally get to these guys a little bit later than most people that, I know you're pretty much, you're a big NFL guy, but you seem like you have a good pulse on some of this stuff that's going on in college as well. So why don't you shed some light on DJ?
Yeah, I mean, guy at South Carolina, he definitely had a lot of production there. I think the question is whether it's going to translate to the NFL. He's not necessarily an elite athlete. But yeah, overall played pretty good there, but it wasn't really graded as an excellent pick there in the 4th round. But he's one of those guys that he's produced on the field, so it may not matter if he has elite athleticism. But yeah, I didn't think it was a guy that was going to come in and be dominant. It's kind of big shoes to fill with Everson Griffin leaving there. So they also got Kenny Willix from Michigan State, who I thought was a pretty good player at Michigan State at D end. He was a solid guy there, and they got him in the 7th round, and that was a good pick for the 7th round. I thought, because I thought that those guys were pretty similar graded. The Wonnum and Willix there out of Michigan State, and then Wonnum out of South Carolina. So. But yeah, we'll see if they can develop them. That defense definitely, they've done a good job developing these young guys. So.
The next pick's probably one of my favorite picks that they had in the draft. Round 4, 130 overall. James Lynch, D tackle out of Baylor. This kid was just an absolute stud for Baylor, putting up records there. He was an All-American, a guy that I felt, fell a little bit too late in the draft. I had him projected to go a little bit higher. I'm not sitting here saying I'm Mel Kiper or anything, but I didn't think he'd be on the draft board this long for him. So, a guy that Zimmer was kind of licking his chops once he saw this was another position in need. They lost a few of their D tackles, a few D linemen overall. So I'm expecting him to, be a guy that I don't know if he'll necessarily be an immediate impact. Maybe you shed some light on that, but definitely a big part of their future going forward.
Yeah, they need help in there with the big guys as they rotate them in and out. They did sign, after they lost Linval Joseph, they signed defensive tackle Michael Pierce, who's like a dominant run defender. So this rookie here, James Lynch, is a guy that can develop behind Michael Pierce and can learn a lot from him to kind of develop and be a rotational player in the D tackle. So, yeah, that was important because it all starts with being able to stop the run, obviously, with this defense, and being able to really occupy blockers so those linebackers can kind of shoot those gaps, with this type of scheme. So I think that's a good scheme fit for them, and it's a guy that will develop along with the new free agent that they got inside there.
And that's one thing that they said that, if he needed to work on anything, it's his run defense. I mean, this guy was perfectly capable of getting after quarterbacks. That's actually a strong suit. I believe he led Baylor in all-time career leader in sacks, 22. So definitely something that, he can definitely benefit from.
He could be a third down type guy. They put him in there. They take Pierce out and put him in the rush package, so where he can contribute right away. And then while he develops as being able to fit the run fits within the scheme as well. So that's good. And then this fourth round, so they made a ton of trades and moved around the board. They did a good job of that. But that linebacker Troy Dye out of Oregon had a great career at Oregon. And so I think that was a steal. That was one of the better late round picks that they have. What did you think about Troy Dye?
I mean, they have a great linebacking core that they can allow this guy to already develop. I think that's a perfect fit for him. I don't know if he'd be necessarily NFL ready right off the rip, but a perfect situation for him, perfect group of guys to learn from. And these guys are getting a little bit older, so when the time is right, he might be ready. And that's kind of how Zimmer likes to groom his defense: is give these guys 1 to 2 years usually minimum. Almost his whole team. He hates playing rookies, but give them 1 to 2 years minimum, and then let them develop behind these guys that have been on their depth chart for years and years. Now they know their scheme, they know their packages, they're ready to go. He doesn't like to throw guys into the fire unless he absolutely has to.
Yeah, I think he provides good depth there at the linebacker group if one of the guys go down, and I think he'll make an immediate contribution on special teams. So that's a nice thing about those type of guys. It's solid tacklers and still pretty athletic. So yeah, so he should be able to help get some pressure off the edge once he develops there. So I think that was a great pick. I think other than that, we probably don't have to break down every single 6th and 7th round pick. They had 14 picks. But it is one thing that with the Vikings to keep an eye on. I'll be keeping an eye on training camp reports and seeing how these rookies develop to see which guys emerge, to keep that in mind. And also which guys we need to attack, like we were talking about in DFS. So
that's
it's
probably the more important part.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. But again, the theme is with the NFL, it's year-to-year league, and things change quite a bit. And the Vikings are going to be a perfect example of that. They're still an excellent team and a great organization, but you can see that their rosters change, so we can't look at them exactly like we did last year. So that's something we'll have to keep in mind here.
Very true, my good friend. Very true. I think we got a plethora of information that we can use, especially taking into week 1. Most notably, I think the most important thing that we've talked about on this whole show that I'm taking away from this is just how we're going to attack this team on the other side of the coin, not necessarily how we're going to use their players, how we plan on attacking them. And that may be the most important aspect we could take from this, is just how many notable changes they've had on their defense and how that's going to impact us in the way that we view them going forward. Justin Jefferson, I think he's going to be just fine in this league. Dalvin Cook is Dalvin Cook. Kirk Cousins should be taking a step forward if this defense is bad. I mean, obviously, interceptions are going to increase as well, but a lot of useful information we got from here, man. So As always, we're going to do what we always do, and we're going to ask you guys if you can go on there on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, get the notification every time we do give you guys one of our new video shows. I mean, we're investing in this fancy gear that we got, man. So we would really appreciate it if you guys can give us a little like and a subscribe. And then on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, iHeartRadio, everywhere that you can hear our podcast. Thumbs up, a rate and review, greatly appreciated. We like to know what we're doing right. We like to know what we can get better at. It means the world of difference for us. And then if you can give us a follow, we'd really appreciate it. Shane, you want to let them know where they can find you on Twitter?
Yeah, so on Twitter, DET Sports Shane. So Detroit DET Sports Shane. Definitely hit me up on Twitter. And remember to check out our website, DFSCoachTalk.com. You can sign up on there, and awesome website. You can sign up, become a member right now, and membership is frozen right now until all the major sports start back up. And what about your Twitter? I want to talk about the KBO a little bit, but go ahead if you want to give them your Twitter as well.
Absolutely. You can find me at Mike Apotria, MikeApotria. Probably going to be the Twitter for the rest of eternity. They're probably sick of hearing it at this point. But yeah, absolutely. To touch on some KBO, because I know a group of guys that we have, you, Coach, Andrew, Santino, absolutely crushing it for all of our members. I think we're 5-1 right now in KBO. Am I right? Am I wrong on that one?
Yeah, that's correct. And last night was a fun night. We came off a tough slate where a lot of the games were rained out, and we were kind of all over the weather there. But one game got late scratched for the weather. So last night we really bounced back in a big way on DraftKings. Andrew and Coach really did a lot of research, did a great job of building the lineup. And in DraftKings, we were in the top 7% of lineup. So we crushed it in cash. We crushed it in the GPPs. And it was exciting watching the action, all the home runs, and one of our pitchers, was dominating. I think he had double-digit strikeouts. So
Dan Straley.
Yeah, it was Straley there. Yeah. So so it was definitely exciting, and we're watching a lot of the games and mixing it up in the Discord, talking about the games and the players, and it's excited. We're just excited because it's real sports. So it's just one thing that we're transitioning to do, because obviously the other major sports are not ready yet. So it's another exciting thing as part of being a member, is be able to get those lineups right now, and your membership is still frozen.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest portion, is that you can join the Discord. You can get involved in these conversations. We're doing fun contests every single day for DFS, baseball and basketball, and even a little bit of football. We know all three of these sports are going to come back to normalcy soon enough, hopefully. And until then, we'll keep just grinding through KBO, making some little coin to build our bankrolls for when these seasons do pick up. We got some free money to play with. So I would say come take advantage of it, guys. It's a great group of guys I love working with. I love doing these shows with Shane. So we'll be back tomorrow, though. So we're going to have some more information for you guys. We're going to continue. I think we're going to round out the division tomorrow. Shane, do you know who's on? Because I know I'm off. I'm pretty awful with the schedule. I know I got to get my reminders set and ready to go.
Yeah. Tomorrow, Andrew Hansen and myself will be doing the Packers. So another NFC North division foe in the black and blue division. And the Packers are kind of a controversial team this year with what they did in the draft. And I'm looking forward to breaking down the Packers. So I think they're going to be an awesome team to look at, to consider some things. So so I will definitely see everyone tomorrow. Come back and check out the Packers breakdown, where Andrew and myself will have great information there. And I want to wish everyone, again, a happy Mother's Day. Enjoy spending time with your mother and your family, especially in these type of times. It's really important to value family and appreciate the time that we have with them.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. That's actually what I'm going to get off the air right now and go do. Go stop by mi madre, say hi, say hello. Let her know that I'm thinking about her, and bring her a nice card and some flowers and stuff. So from everybody over here at DFS Coach Talk, I'm with Shane and saying happy Mother's Day. Stay safe, guys. And we look forward to continue crushing some KBO and getting some regular sports back soon enough. Take care. Have fun, guys. We'll be back tomorrow.